There's some really great beginner thaumaturge guides out there, but I felt that they were a little lacking in some of the details that I wanted. So, after obsessing over my own thaumaturge for a year and a half, I'm now going to share all of my secrets and tips and tricks with you. Welcome to Advanced Thaumaturgy. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben U here for a Pathfinder 2e video. Normally I'm a Magic the Gathering YouTuber, but I forked off onto a separate channel because I wanted to make this video. I'm really enjoying the system. I just got done playing a campaign with a Thaumaturge, and I think I've got a lot of knowledge to share. And we're going to get really into the weeds today, talking about action economy and implements, stats, all sorts of stuff. Do a little bit of math, do a tiny little combat demonstration sort of thing as well. If you like what you see and you want to see more Pathfinder 2e content from me, throw me a like, throw me a comment, throw me a subscription. This is a brand new channel. All of that stuff means a lot. With that said, why don't we go ahead and start this video by talking about the class fantasy. That is, what is the Thaumaturge? What is this class supposed to be? Because when I started building my Thaumaturge, I had some wrong ideas about what this class was going to be based on what I had read and seen. So in my mind, when I first started thinking about building my Thaumaturge, I was thinking, this is going to be my critical hit build. I'm going to take this weapon implement that rewards me for my criticals. I'm going to take the mirror implement. I'm going to give myself flanking. I'm going to use these charisma actions to demoralize my opponents, and I'm going to be a crit-based character. And then once I understood the system a little bit better, I realized that the Thaumaturge is not actually built to do that, despite having good support within the class to make it appear like you can do so. So here's how the math works. Here's why I say that. So as a Thaumaturge, your class boost goes to Charisma because many of your abilities, like your esoteric lore checks, are going to be using Charisma. Mathematically, what this means is that right here, you are not getting a boost to your accuracy. So our level 1 Thaumaturge, just using some regular old random weapon, has a +6 to hit. Another martial, like say a monk, who has an ability score from their class and gets that class boost to their accuracy thing, is going to have a +7. So from the get-go at level 1, you are 1 accuracy behind a normal martial character. And if we go to a fighter who is not just trained in weapons, but is an expert in these weapons, that fighter has a +9. That fighter is 3 to hit over you, and you are 1 below a normal martial. So conceptually, my brain initially really thought, hey, the Thaumaturge is supposed to be this crit character. We have so much support for it. But what's really happening is the Thaumaturge has very good abilities that support it because it does not have that same accuracy as other characters. So you can build a Thaumaturge and live that big crit fantasy. You can work towards that, but you will be working towards that. It is not going to come as easily as it might to other classes. So instead of viewing the Thaumaturge as this big crits class, instead I really like viewing the Thaumaturge as a big hit class. Not crit, but hit. Your Thaumaturge hits are going to be chonky. Your accuracy is totally fine still, especially given all the support and utility bonuses that you do have. But if you are going into your campaign expecting to crit all the time and you're putting all these runes on your weapons that do cool things when you crit, maybe temper those expectations just a little bit and you'll probably be happier as a whole. One of the other things that I've sometimes seen online is people wanting to play these multi-hit Thaumaturges. These Thaumaturges that are going to attempt to use an agile weapon, and they are going to attempt to apply the damage bonus that you get as a Thaumaturge to multiple hits in a turn. And I think that's going to be another one of those things where you're not going to be happy with the overall result if you are trying to do that. So let's back this up with math once again. So our level 1 Thaumaturge has a +6 to hit, and with a non-agile weapon, that second attack at -5 map is only a +1, which is not great. Let's say that you are using an agile weapon, such as a star knife. You get a -4 map. Great bonus. And while every +1 certainly matters, your second attack at +2 accuracy is not good. So if you want to be that multi-hit character, there are classes that will let you live that fantasy much better, such as a ranger. I believe your flurry ranger gets a greatly reduced map and some feats that can help out with that as well. But then where does that leave us in terms of this class fantasy for the Thaumaturge? What is it that they actually are then? You're not the big crits character. You're not the attack multiple times character. What is the core class identity? I think the best way to sum up a Thaumaturge is as a customizable utility marshal. Customizable utility marshal. That's how I view it in my head. The Thaumaturge is a class of options. Rather than maxing out any one stat, the Thaumaturge gets to do a little bit of everything, and you get to cater your character and design your character to fill whatever roles you need in your party or your specific campaign. Your implements and feats give you strong in and out of combat options. Within combat, you have very strong offensive and defensive options. And Scroll Thaumaturgy, in particular, turns the Thaumaturge into this really unrivaled utility character. And Scroll Thaumaturgy is so good that we're going to loop back to that for its own section just a little bit later on. But for now, let me just say that Scroll Thaumaturgy, and let's pull that up. Scroll Thaumaturgy gives you access to every magical tradition using your Thaumaturge class DC at level 1. You can probably imagine some uses for that already. I'll spell some good ones out a little bit later on. And your esoteric lore is going to make you into one of the best recall knowledge machines in the entire system. If you want a one-to-one parallel, the Thaumaturge is probably closest to the champion, as many of its abilities are very similar to what the champion is capable of doing. But while the champion has a clearly defensive leaning to many of its abilities, the Thaumaturge has tendrils that go out in so many more directions and give you this incredibly customizable experience that, in my mind, is one of the cooler classes in Pathfinder 2e because of exactly how customizable it is. You can build the perfect character for your campaign as a Thaumaturge pretty much no matter what your campaign is going to be. You have the ability to solve just about any problem by yourself. Now, maybe you need time, maybe you need resources, maybe you need money, but given the access to all of the magical traditions and the level of knowledge that your character is going to have, you can figure out a way to get through something, and you can enable your party members to do great things. You are probably not the star of the show as the Thaumaturge. You might not be doing the most damage. You might not have the biggest heals, but you can enable your party members to shine by protecting them, by letting them know which save to target, by letting them know, hey, there's this weird aura going on. I know exactly what it is. The Thaumaturge is this amazing support utility marshal. So, with the class fantasy out of the way and having established what it means to be a Thaumaturge and what your role or roles are likely going to be, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. Why don't we talk about action economy? So, action economy time. Let's talk about it. Many times I see posts on the Pathfinder subreddit saying, I don't know what to do with my third action. Good news, as a Thaumaturge, you are literally never going to have that problem. In fact, the opposite is frequently true, where the Thaumaturge will wish desperately, in fact, that they had a fourth action every turn, and the Thaumaturge will often find that they don't have enough action economy to do all of the cool things that they are capable of. And you might have some abilities that are very good that you don't quite have the time or ability to set up because of the constraints of a real combat where sometimes you need to be healing someone, sometimes you need to be providing flanking, sometimes you need to be supporting rather than doing damage. And so throughout your career of building your Thaumaturge and picking all your feats as you level up, anything you can find that compresses action economy is going to be very good. Now, this is true on any character. Action economy is king. Get the most out of your actions. Do the best thing that you can for your turn. And that doesn't always mean doing damage, but doing the best thing that you can on your turn, taking advantage of your actions, taking advantage of your reaction whenever you can. That's what you want to be doing. So early on in a Thaumaturge's career, you're probably looking at Instructive Strike, which can allow you to recall knowledge when you hit something, and Diverse Lore. As you are doing your check for Exploit Vulnerability, you can also get a free recall knowledge as well, assuming that you succeed. Those are some fantastic examples early on, and there's plenty more throughout the rest of your career, especially if you start dipping into other things via something like Free Archetype. But the critical lesson here in regards to Thaumaturges and action economy is that if you over invest in abilities that require actions within combat, this is going to tax you further, and you may be investing into abilities that you are not practically going to use. So let's talk about some sample things that a Thaumaturge might want to do in a turn. Move. Exploit vulnerability. Attack. Activate some active implement, such as the mirror. Do a separate recall knowledge check. If you are level 9 or higher, intensify vulnerability. That's a decent list of things. That's not considering anything fancy, like an item that you might want to activate, a potion you might want to do, a scroll that you might want to activate, a consumable you want to drink. Not taking into account combat abilities, your feints, your demoralizes, your battle medicines. So when you are building your character, if you're like, oh, this thing is cool, I'd love to have that on my character, and that thing costs 2 actions, I want you to think real hard about whether or not you are actually going to want that thing. Early on when I was building my character, I was like, oh, I want to have a cantrip. I think that's so cool, because I'll 2 action, use my cantrip, which is a save, and then I can attack at full accuracy still. That feels like cheating. That's so good. And, well, I did use that cantrip a handful of times throughout the campaign, and it was good when I used it. The vast majority of the time, I found that that was not the best use of my actions. The best use of my actions wasn't just, hey, I want to output as much damage as possible. It's the utility that is built into my character. I had other better things that I could do, and maybe investing resources into getting a cantrip or getting other 2 action abilities is not where I wanted to be. Most, Pathfinder 2e tables play with the free archetype rule that gives you access to a ton of extra flexibility and customization. Well, guess what? The Thaumaturge is already a character of customization. You are already going to have so many options available to you just within your own class before you start getting into anything like free archetype. And when I'm building a Pathfinder character, I'm often looking for my archetype to plug some hole or weakness that my character has, or I'm trying to get some cool quirk or ability or combo or something like that online. When you are selecting your archetype and you're playing a Thaumaturge, think about whether or not you're actually going to have the actions to use the abilities that you are going to be selecting if you are picking a combat centric archetype. And I might encourage you to consider things that give you passive bonuses that don't require actions. Your Thaumaturge already has a ton of things going on in combat. You maybe don't need the free archetype to give you more. And maybe you could use your free archetype to give you some skill trainings in the tradition of something like a rogue or an investigator. Or if you want to push your character to the limits, take your Beastmaster archetype, sit on your animal companion, ride it around, have fun, enjoy your 4th effective free action in the turn, meaning that you don't have to use your own action to move because your mature animal companion gets 1 action and it has like a 40-foot move speed. Like, break the game however you want. It can be really fun to do that sort of stuff. But you probably don't need me to tell you that, like, Beastmaster archetype is good. But should you find yourself about to go into a terrible, terrible boss fight, you know it's coming. You can use scrolls of any tradition. Or you walk in that door, slap on a scroll of haste, give yourself that 4th action. If you gain the ability to prepare for a fight, given that the Thaumaturge can be a self-buff or even party buff master, you can set yourself up for action economy success. And that's pretty cool. All right, moving on, let's talk about class power. Why is the Thaumaturge strong? For a spellcaster, the strength of that class often comes from the spell list and maybe 1 or 2 abilities from specific feats a little bit later on. But that's not how the Thaumaturge operates. Almost all of the strength of the Thaumaturge comes from the class chassis, like the underbelly, the key abilities that you just get by leveling up. What that means is that you are not locked in to picking particular feats, for the most part, in order to increase the power level of your class. Now, are there a couple of standout Thaumaturge feats that are just incredible, and you'll probably want them on most Thaumaturges? Sure. But depending on how you are building your character, you might find that you have room to dip into an archetype a little bit harder than you might on other characters. Many of the Thaumaturge feats are specific to building your Thaumaturge in a certain way. Let's show you what I mean here. There are many feats that look like this, where they only apply if you are building one particular type of Thaumaturge. Many of them will give you things that impact your class DC or allow you to expand the range of one of your abilities, and they just won't apply. So while the Thaumaturge has an excellent range of feats, there might not be that many that are just central to your build. So let's imagine for a second that you are at a free archetype table. You really like your archetype. You can sometimes just skip a Thaumaturge feat and take an extra feat from your archetype and flush out that side of your character a little bit more. But keep in mind, if you dip heavily into your archetype, make sure you're not overtaxing your in-combat actions. You could also go into a second archetype as long as you fit the basic requirements of taking the dedication and then 2 feats from within that dedication, which as a Thaumaturge you could do from a surprisingly low level. In my mind, there are 2 standout early game Thaumaturge feats that most of them are going to want. And sorry, Ammunition Thaumaturgy, it's not you. The first of these is Diverse Lore. This gives you 2 different things, and they are both absolutely insane. First, it gives you the ability to use esoteric knowledge to recall knowledge about literally anything. You take a -2 penalty to your check to do so, but given how high your esoteric lore is going to be, I never really found that to be a problem. And going back to the idea that action economy is king, when you succeed at a check to exploit a vulnerability, you also get to compare the result of that esoteric lore check to the DC to recall knowledge. And if it's a success or a critical success, you essentially get a free action recall knowledge there. And if you open up a battle preparing to make all your implements work against the biggest, scariest enemy, and getting to figure out a critical weakness from that enemy or understand the aura that that enemy has, your party is immediately at a massive advantage. Standout feat number 2 is Scroll Thaumaturgy. Gaining access to every tradition of magic is fantastic. And there is a follow-up tree for the Scroll Thaumaturgy feat that allows you to automatically get scrolls every day. You just kind of like, poof, get the ability to make them. And that is all fine and good. Even if you don't follow up on that, doing this one so that when your party finds loot and you're like, oh, cool, this awesome scroll of blah, blah, blah. Oh no, no one is trained in that magical tradition. We can't use it. You'll always be able to use it. While we are talking about class strengths, let's briefly talk about what may end up being a weakness for your Thaumaturge. So let's build some stats for my imaginary Thaumaturge here. So we're going to do strength, we're going to do charisma. I'm standing in the front lines. I'll take a point of con here. And then let's say I'm getting a point of dex to round out some armor or something like that. Your saving throws are going to be based on your con stat, your dex stat, and your wisdom stat. Let's just do a quick check here to see how many times I boosted those things, and oh, your Thaumaturge is beginning having expert proficiency in 2 of the saving throws, and this is pretty necessary because you are often going to be building Thaumaturges that are not investing into the skills that are required for good saving throws. This is something to just kind of be aware of. There might not be a ton you can do about it, especially if you want to be, say, putting some into wisdom to increase something like battle medicine that you want to have on your character. You might find overall that your saving throws end up a little lower compared to some of your party members. And I know I definitely listened to some of the numbers that my party members were rolling across the campaign, and I was just like, is that math right? Is that possible? Is that how that really works? So your saving throws might not be pushing the upper limits of what a Pathfinder character's saving throws look like, is all I'm citing. All right, let's get into some juicy stuff here. Let's talk implements for a minute. And I'm not going to go over what each implement is and what each implement does. I'll leave that research to you. I'm going to talk about some broad strokes of implements here instead. You are going to have your choice of 9 different implements. Most of them are pretty good. You might find that some of them are more powerful in combat. You might find that some of them are more powerful out of combat. And you can customize your character for the experience that you want and the sort of campaign that you are expecting. Some of the traditional advice I see for implements is that you should be taking one active implement, that is, one implement that has an activated ability that you are expecting to use, maybe not every turn in combat, but most turns in combat. One implement that gives you a reaction, and then one implement that gives you a passive benefit of some kind. So you might want to take the regalia that gives you a passive benefit, the amulet that gives you the reaction, and then maybe something like the mirror that gives you an action. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that advice. I don't actually think that advice is good. I might be ruffling some feathers here, which is good. I like to promote discussion. So I like again and again and again when I'm reading posts about Thaumaturge, I see this active passive reaction thing. And the reality is that you are probably not going to play with 3 implements on your Thaumaturge. I played a Thaumaturge for a year and a half, ballpark, and I played my character from level 3 to level 12 or 13. You get your 3rd implement at level 15. So the idea of spreading out between an active, a passive, and a reaction is not going to apply to the vast majority of people who play Thaumaturges. Most campaigns don't go to that high of a level. Most people don't play for that long. And so I say, take the ones you think are cool. If you want to take multiple reaction ones, I actually think that's a really good idea. Let's take a look at an example Thaumaturge reaction to explain why I'm so keen on having multiple reactions as a Thaumaturge. Let's pick the amulet here. The amulet's pretty cool. Trigger. The target of your exploit vulnerability would damage you or an ally within 15 feet of you. So, this is a narrow reaction. So, you need to be exploiting vulnerability on the thing that is doing damage. It needs to damage either you or an ally within 15 feet of you. Now, if you are in a small room, you're in some dungeon, you open a door, there's an enemy inside, yeah, those things are all probably going to be true. But what if you are spread out over a town square or something like that? What if you are on a larger battle map? Well, all those things might not be true at the same time. If you have multiple different reactions, you gain more opportunities to use a reaction. And let's go back to that idea of action economy being king. The 3 action economy is one of the things that makes the Pathfinder 2e system so freaking good and so enjoyable. But you get a 4th action. You get to do another thing if you get to use your reaction. So, if you choose 2 different reactions as a Thaumaturge, you are more likely to be able to use a reaction in a given turn cycle, and thus you cheat out that 4th action more often than not. If you have a weapon implement and nobody is around you for you to get that attack of opportunity off, your reaction is wasted. And at higher levels, the Thaumaturges can pick up an ability, I think it's level 14, that gives you an additional reaction for your implements. So if you take that feat, having multiple different reactions is not a bad thing. On my character, I got an extra reaction from an archetype, and I kind of went back and forth about whether I would use my implements interruption reaction from my Thaumaturge class features or my reaction that I got from my free archetype. And I was super happy to have those extra options, and I almost always used my reaction. If you find yourself lacking in a reaction because you're not choosing reaction implements, that might be a fantastic thing to pick up from an archetype. For example, let's say you are playing a dexterity-based Thaumaturge, and you have at least 2 dexterity. At level 2, you can pick up your rogue dedication, and then at level 4, you can get a fantastic reaction such as nimble dodge. And there's other things that you can do to accomplish the same sort of thing there, with one of the more powerful ones being the champion dedication. The champion dedication is really strong, maybe even a touch too strong, as at level 6, you just gain access to the champion's reaction associated with your cause, often giving you a fantastic attack of opportunity or an incredibly good damage mitigation tool of some kind. The champion kind of shares design space with the Thaumaturge, so if you end up going a Thaumaturge with a champion dedication route, you may end up with some slightly overlapping but different abilities, and you may feel like you lose a little bit of your Thaumaturge identity, as the champion stuff is really, really good. I will tell you that I played a Thaumaturge with a champion dedication. It was great. It was very strong. I enjoyed it a lot. But the champion things did drown out a little bit of the flavor of my Thaumaturge. And I ended up using my champion's reaction just as much, if not more, than my reaction I got from my own implement, because the champion reaction is more general. It will work in more circumstances. It doesn't just work on the target of your exploit vulnerability. So just kind of buyer beware, make sure you're not optimizing too much of the fun out of what you're doing. While I don't want to go over all of the implements, I feel like one of them is so cool and has so many niche uses that it does get its own section in this video, and that is the mirror. This thing is awesome, and there's a lot of words here, the gist of which is that you go full Naruto, Kagebunshin no Jutsu, you make a duplicate of yourself within 15 feet of you, and it both is and isn't you. And they even say in the ability that, you can provide flanking even with yourself. And that is kind of the floor of what this is capable of. And the ceiling for what you can do with this is awesome. You don't have to think of it as I'm making a copy of myself. Think of this as limited teleportation. You start in spot 1. You create a copy 15 feet away. Let's say that one becomes the new you. You can then make another copy of yourself 15 feet away, which becomes the real one. You have the ability to teleport from building to building. Oh, there's a balcony? Whoop! Mirror, and now I am up there. There's a river, you're on the other side of it. You fell in a pit? No, you didn't. You teleport to the top. The more creative you are, the cooler things you can do with the mirror. Oh, you can see inside that building? Let's see. An unoccupied space within 15 feet that you can see. Well, that window is now a door, and bam, you're inside. You go, you unlock the door for the rest of your party. The mirror ends up being this really cool roleplay tool in ways that I wasn't necessarily expecting when I initially built the character. Now, your mirror image doesn't last forever. Most of the time, your mirror image is going to disappear at the start of your turn. There are some other things that can make it disappear earlier. Now, we're going to go to a fake battle map for a minute so that I can talk about a couple of things going on with the mirror in combat that are quite cool. Welcome to the battle map. Here is my wonderful little mini for my Thaumaturge, Damien. Unfortunately, Damien has been knocked over and is prone. Damien's very sad because he knows that he is going to have to use an action to stand up and then an action to move to something if he wants to attack. Oh wait, no he doesn't, because Damien is a mirror Thaumaturge. So from prone, Damien, bloop, will make a mirror image of himself. And now, instead of having to use one action to stand up and one action to move, for a single action, Damien has ended up in exactly the place he wanted. Now, our shadow Damien that we have here is currently the mirror image. But later on, we can decide that this was indeed the real Damien, and Damien never has to use action economy to stand up. There are a lot of little interactions like this that you can use to wiggle into the correct place. And one of the other cool things about the Thaumaturge is that you gain an absolutely massive ability to spread out your reaction. So Damien creates Shadow Damien. We'll call him Shamian over here, 15 feet away. When we were looking at the amulet earlier, we saw that within 15 feet, we can go and use that ability, okay? But now, since this is Schrodinger's Damien, where they are both Damien, until they're not, we can now base our reaction both on where Damien is and where Shadow Damien is, as we technically occupy both of these spaces. So if you leave your mirror's reaction out and it doesn't get shattered, more on that in 1 second, the mirror implement can be a really good way to make sure that you are really getting a chance to use your reaction. There is, however, one other thing that I want to talk about with the mirror implement, and that is the adept benefit of the mirror. I'm going to read this one just word for word here. Your mirror self shatters into punishing shards when damaged, while mirror's reflection is in effect when an enemy adjacent to one of your spaces damages you. That version of you explodes into mirror shards. This ends Mir's reflection, establishing the remaining version of you as the real one, and deals slashing damage to all creatures in a 5-foot emanation around where your mirror self was. Damage is equal to 2 plus half your level, or the damage of the triggering attack, whichever is lower. You're immune to this damage. This is listed as a benefit, and I'm not really sure that it is a benefit in most cases. Conceptually, the idea of one of these exploding, you don't get multi-attacked by the monster, is really cool, but this is not an optional ability. This is something that happens. When this is in effect, and an adjacent enemy damages you, that one explodes. You don't get to say, oh no, that was the real me. It just happens. So just kind of be aware of that if you take the Adept Mirror benefit. I avoided taking this on my character as I was really wanting to spread out my reactions. But, also feel free to talk to your DM and be like, hey, how do you feel about this being a May? And your DM will probably go like, yeah, that's cool. Or they go, nah, I think we should play it as it is. But either way, it's probably fine. I think it's just one of those things you should be aware of. Note that putting up with, air quotes, the adept benefit will be really useful if you do go all the way with the mirror, as the Paragon benefit is kind of nuts. When you use Mirror's Reflection, you can have one of yourselves immediately interact, seek, or strike. And again, action economy is key. That's one of the things we really care about as a Thaumaturge. So make it to high level play. Level 17, you got some real cool stuff coming with the mirror. I didn't get that far. All right, what's our next section here? Really? Hands? Hands are important enough that they get their whole section? You bet they do. To understand why hands are so important to this character, we need to look at 2 bits of text from the Thaumaturge. The first is the text of Implements Empowerment. Essentially, when you strike, you deal 2 additional damage per weapon die. That's cool. But channeling the power requires the full use of your hands. You don't gain the benefit of Implements Empowerment if you are holding anything in either hand other than a single weapon, other implements, or esoterica. That is, the random BS that you have that lets you, throw cold iron on your weapon or silver on your weapon so that you have exactly what you need to hit the target's weak point for massive damage. And you must be holding at least one implement to gain the benefit. So practically speaking, let's say we are a weapon Thaumaturge. You have your weapon in one of your hands. You have maybe some of your esoterica or another implement in your other hand. You get your implement's empowerment, you are good to go. But as soon as you have something like a potion in your hand, you lose out on that bonus damage. Now, we could drink this potion, and then this is gone, and this hand is free again, and that's perfectly fine. It's okay to have something in your hands for a little while. It's okay to do something else with your hands for a little while. But ultimately, if you want to be doing big Thaumaturge dammies, you need to keep your hands free. And that means getting things in and out of your hands as quickly as possible, if you need to use your hands for anything else. The other bit of text that really helps with all the hand stuff is under Second Implement, which is going to happen at level 5. While you're holding an implement in one hand, you can quickly switch it with another implement you're wearing to use an action from the implement you're switching to. And this includes for your reaction as well. So let's go back to the idea of hands. I am a Thaumaturge with a weapon implement and an amulet implement. I don't necessarily have to have these in both of my hands. I can attack with my weapon implement on my own turn, and in that same left hand, I can magically, go and grab my amulet in order to use my reaction later on in the turn cycle, and that's perfectly fine. But the Thaumaturge is this awesome utility character who might have all sorts of scrolls that they want to be using. Maybe you have a bag full of tricks, items, potions that you're using as well that fit the eclectic nature of your character. You want those things to go in and out of your hands so that the only thing that ends up in your hands are those implements so that you get your implements bonus damage. So, there are a couple of items that you might want to know about, or a couple of tricks you can do to kind of cheat the system a little bit. Because normally, assuming that you want to drink a potion, that's one action to draw that potion, that's one action to drink it. That's two actions down the drain. That's not super acceptable for our character that is already very taxed on action economy. I, for example, really enjoyed the potion patch, where it's as if you have a just patch that you have stored the potion in and you just slap it and your potion is used. You have to load a potion into it ahead of time, but then instead of one action to draw, one action to drink, it is just one action to activate. And then you are not caring about that potion being in your hands because it's never really there. It's just one action, requirements, the potion patch is affixed to your skin, bam, we've never messed with our hands at all. Awesome. At a slightly higher level, you can start looking at the retrieval belt, which was formerly the gloves of storage, which has a free action, an item stored in the belt. You have a free hand, which you might as a thaumaturge, because, we care about free hands. The item stored in your belt appears in your hand, and that's a free action. We can't keep activating this. You only get one of those per minute. But if you have some critical potion or scroll you need or something, that retrieval belt can be free action activated, one or maybe two actions, activate the thing that you need to do, and you end your turn with your hands free, so that if you do something like a weapon implement reaction, you get your bonus damage. And in thinking about hands, this also plays into your skill trainings, believe it or not. Like, let's think about athletics. You want to be shoving and tripping and using your free hand to do those things? Is that going to leave you in an awesome position? Your Thaumaturge might have a high or high-ish strength score, but do you actually want to go down the athletics training tree to do all of these really cool, like, grappler-style actions? The answer might be a resounding no on your Thaumaturge, despite, on the surface, it seeming like the Thaumaturge should be good at that if you've built a strength Thaumaturge. But other skills don't actually use hands, despite the fact that you think they would. I am, of course, referring to battle medicine, which has the requirements you're holding, or wearing, a healer's toolkit. So you can just boop someone and use battle medicine without it impacting what is in your hands at all, which is incredibly useful. And this is one of those moments where we have to suspend disbelief for a minute and just go like, okay, this is a tabletop game at the end of the day. This isn't the most accurate to real life in every single situation. What do you think? We finally talk about scroll thaumaturgy and how awesome it is? I think it's time for the love letter to scroll thaumaturgy. Alrighty, why don't we talk about scrolls? Oh, why did that appear with dollar signs? That's kind of weird. Now, your traditional spellcasters have some number of spell slots every day, and they either know some spells or they prepare specific spells every day. And your traditional spellcasters might keep a handful of scrolls around to solve some problems. Oh, I don't want to really learn or prepare water breathing, but it'd be really cool if I had one of those scrolls just in case we end up down by that lake that the DM was describing in great detail earlier in this session. As a thaumaturge who has access to all 4 magical traditions, assuming that you have the money to do so, you can cast any spell in the game. Now, there is going to be a financial cost associated with this, so you maybe can't be spamming a billion scrolls every day, but if you are not investing into a ton of items, you probably have a decent amount of money that you can use to buy really cool utility scrolls that get you through just about anything. You are Seto Kaiba, you get to go, screw the rules, I have money, I have all 4 spell traditions, and you get to see how much damage, metaphorical damage, you get to do with that. you gain the ability to solve a massive number of problems, assuming that you can go to town and buy an appropriately leveled scroll. I played a party with a magus, a monk, a sorcerer, a thaumaturge, and a fighter. Our sorcerer was choosing spells based on flavor of what they thought their character should be doing, which, massive thumbs up to me. Our magus, obviously, was taking spells that worked with spell strike. You know what our party did not have? Any utility spells. Just like none. They weren't there. But what could my character do? My character could fill the gaps in the party with money. We have a problem. We literally solved it with money. Now, did I have enough money to do this all by myself? No. And this was one of those times where I was like, hey, party, I can probably help us. I need some money to buy some scrolls if I'm going to do that, though. And we pooled a decent amount of our party's just sort of collective funds into helping to solve problems via scrolls, and it worked really, really well. And guess what? You have access to every single broken spell in the game. You don't feel like you're moving fast enough? Second level Tailwind scroll, you get to do it. And every scenario like that that occurs where you think one spell is just a little bit too good, you do have access to it. Are you going to be as efficient as doing that as a regular spellcaster? No, probably not. But you can do it. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of solving interesting problems via scrolls, and then I'm going to give you my MVP pick for best scroll, and it is probably not what you're thinking. So, scenario 1. A whole bunch of baddies are about 60 feet away from the party. They are about to, attack some helpless villagers, typical bad guy stuff. And the heroes have been started far away from the enemies to raise the stakes. Well, we saw this scenario coming, and before we rolled initiative, I had time to draw a scroll. And I'll show you what I drew. I drew a scroll of Blazing Dive before I started that battle. So I used my first 2 actions to fly 15 feet up in the air, 60 feet forward directly to these enemies, and then I did a little bit of damage on my way in, and I think I got to take a swing on my first turn as well. Now, I think my movement speed was only 25 at the time, so it would have taken me 3 actions to run up to these enemies. But Blazing Dive gave me that action economy compression that I was looking for. And because I knew what the problem was, and because I had kind of prepared for a fight where I might start too far away from my movement speed, I kind of solved the problem of this initial fight. And then those enemies attacked me instead of the helpless villagers because I was there. Now, was my character temporarily in great danger, and was it a little touch and go for about 2 rounds of combat? Yeah, it was. But it was really cool. Scenario number 2. I was playing in a homebrew sort of hero-style campaign, and we were alerted of a high-level jailbreak happening a state away. And so our party was going to have to go and trudge, a couple of hours in a car or something to go and get to this location. Or at least, that's what the DM was expecting us to do. Maybe we get in a car, maybe we get in a plane, maybe we're important enough we get a helicopter or something. But the DM was expecting it to take a significant amount of time for us to get to this jailbreak. And that is not what happened. Instead, our party pooled money and bought a scroll of teleport. I don't remember if we did the 6th level or if we had to buy the heightened to 7th level scroll. I remember it being very expensive, but we teleported our party there for the time it took for us to go to the center of town and buy a scroll. Now, was the DM being a little friendly and saying, like, yes, there is a scroll of teleport in town? Yes, absolutely they were. Again, uncommon tags mean that things might not be in every game, but that was one of those amazing moments where instead of arriving after the jailbreak and dealing with the follow-up of a bunch of villains being released, We got to instead try and stop it. Now, we weren't fully successful, but we got our chance to try. And now, for my number one scroll, my most used scroll, the one that I recommend to every single one of you, put it into your mind's eye. What do you think it's going to be? Object reading. Have you even heard of this one? So this was my favorite spell to cast from scrolls in my campaign. It's first level, which means that my Thaumaturge was able to make them every single day very easily after I had gained a couple of levels. Alt spell list. You place a hand on an object to learn a piece of information about an emotional event that occurred involving the object within the past week, determined by the GM. You cast object reading on the same item multiple times. You can either concentrate on a single event to gain additional pieces of information about that event, or gain a piece of information about another emotional event in the applicable time frame. And you can heighten this spell, or in our case, obtain a higher level scroll of it to learn about an event in the last month, or even the last year, or further if you go very high on into the game. And this was one of those things that let my character play detective in a way that an investigator normally might. And this was one of my favorite things because it lets the DM play, it lets the DM tell a story. Like, you find a murder weapon, you find some critical piece of evidence that the DM is teasing you with, and you get to go, DM, I want to know more of the story. Tell me more about this. What happened with this thing? And it gives you a lot of agency in the storytelling and roleplay and out of combat experience. And I think it's very easy with Scroll Thaumaturgy to go like, oh man, I can Sure Strike. I'm going to start, the combat with a Sure Strike scroll. I'm going to move. I'm going to Sure Strike. I'm going to take my attack. I'm going to get my big crit. You can build a Thaumaturge that does cool things with scrolls in combat. But I think it's the out of combat utility like this that really makes the Scroll Thaumaturgy shine. And I love this feat. I love object reading so much. I suppose the final bit of advice I have for all you budding thaumaturges out there is please don't be afraid to make a cheat sheet with what your character is capable of doing. The Thaumaturge is a relatively complicated character. There's a lot of degrees of success that matter on this character. You might end up using or imposing a large number of status conditions. You might need to refer to some tables for some things like battle medicine if you go that route. Who knows, maybe you end up with a familiar even. That's another thing that thaumaturges can do. Maybe you have an independent familiar who's going to use actions to hand you things in battle. Your character is so customizable and so unique that it might be worth it to make a little Google Doc that just says, hey, here's all of the things that I can do. Because I will tell you, I forgot lots of things that my thaumaturge can do. I miss stuff. And I am like a lifetime strategy gamer. I am optimizing things all of the time. And there were tons of times where I missed some extra damage that could apply because I was just playing on paper with dice. And I had more options than what I realized in many cases. And I ended up with a 5-page long Google Doc helping me to kind of keep track of everything my character was capable of doing. No shame in doing that. It helps a lot, especially when you are first getting started with this character. With that being said, I think that's all I have to teach you about thaumaturges, and I hope you found this useful. If you did, please throw me a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more and encourage me to make more, and I wish you the best of luck. The Thaumaturge is an awesome class. It's really fun. Let me know what you're doing, and if you have some other tips that you think I missed, throw them down in the comments below. All right. Have a great rest of the day. See ya.